Have you heard about the latest issue that you need to be outraged about? It's the gas stove in your kitchen. The government tells us that it's dangerous, but don't worry, they're going to take care of us. They're going to come get your gas stove. Let's talk about why we are perpetually outraged about the silliest things. A few days ago, a man by the name of Richard Trumka of the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission stated that a ban on gas stoves should be on the table because they are dangerous. The government tells us that exposure to NO2 from gas stoves has been linked to reduced cognitive performance. Now, I was amazed to hear that because it makes me wonder if gas stoves isn't the secret behind all of the really stupid people that we have in our generation today. But it's good to know that the government is out to take care of us and they want to ban gas stoves. In fact, New York Governor Kathy Hochul has already introduced a proposal to ban gas stoves in new homes and all commercial construction by 2030. Likewise, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has weighed in on Twitter with an eye roll saying that while gas stoves have to be eliminated, the real battle is going to be with those mouth-breathing conservatives who are going to be upset about it. Well, here's the thing. They want us to think that the science is settled here. Just like so many other questions, the decree has gone out. How can you even argue with the latest pronouncement from on high? I want to explore why everything in our culture is such a big deal. What can we think biblically about this hive mind that invents something and declares that it's the greatest, most important issue in the history of mankind, and we all need to get on board when it's a topic that nobody was talking about 5 minutes ago? How do we go from 0 to 60 on the outrage meter over the silliest stuff? And it's not just progressives, it's hyper-conservatives as well. We are bent out of shape all the time about everything. What can we figure out as we assess this? I called it a hive mind. Charles Cook of the National Review has said this is one of the creepiest parts of modern progressivism, is this instant pronouncement of some outrage and the expectation that everybody immediately jumps on board, even though we'd never heard of the issue 5 minutes ago. They tell us gas stoves are bad. Gas stoves have always been bad. The holy mouth of science has declared it. So why are we even questioning the wisdom of the ages, even though nobody had mentioned it until just yesterday? Well, here we go. Let's talk about this outrage culture. The secular West, mostly progressives, but also some secular conservatives, have this idea that everything is of vital and critical and supreme importance. Why is that? Well, here's what I think. I think that this drive to be outraged by the most minuscule topics is an attempt to satisfy an impulse for absolute truth that is hardwired into human beings in our generation who have rejected the very concept of absolute truth. Now think about it. It's not just leftists, but leftists a lot are guilty of hungering for a prophet to speak eternal truths when they have categorically removed the possibility that such prophet and such eternal truths can even exist. Think about this. Moses in the Old Testament taught the universal truth that all human life was valuable because it was created in the image of God. And yet secularists in our day have rejected the whole idea of the image of God. In fact, our culture's devotion to abortion has left us with the idea that if there is such a thing as the image of God, it can only be seen when a child is wanted. What a dangerous standard to live by. You only have the right to live if somebody wants you. You know, the natural conclusion of that is what happens to all of those old people who have outlived their friends and their family? What if nobody wants them? Is it okay to kill old people? That's where this thinking leads us. Well, it's not just Moses, but King David. King David taught us that there is a joy in belonging to a God who fearfully and wonderfully crafted us. He created us uniquely according to a design in His mind of how we should be. And yet what we've seen in our culture, by embracing transgenderism, we have robbed people of the comfort that comes from belonging to God and sensing that He did something in me on purpose. I'm not a mistake. Transgender belief argues that we are limited to our sin-stained hearts and our weak, finite minds to try and become the lords of our own identity and the creators of our own peace. Instead of finding our place in God's plan, we've now been left wandering in the wilderness, trying to establish our own identity and our own significance. Even Jesus came along and said that His atoning blood would make it possible for us to be washed clean of our sins, to have guilt removed from us, so that we could begin to live a life in relationship to God that fulfills that deepest hardwired longing that we have, that impulse for something that is true and unshakable. Jesus said, I'll make the way for you to have that. But what have we done in the secular West? We have developed a cultural religion that requires perpetual confession, but never gives absolution or forgiveness. I mean, in our culture, there's always something else to be upset about. We've got to tear down that statue because some guy from 200 years ago didn't live a perfect life according to our standards. We've got to ban gas stoves because now somehow they're the most dangerous thing on the planet. We've got to keep cows from farting because somehow the whole world is going to come crashing down if we can't stop the greenhouse effect of bovine flatulence. It's always something, and it's almost always ridiculous. Do a study sometime of the addresses of the most powerful people on earth. They're telling us that the climate is changing, that we're less now than a decade away. Al Gore told us 3 years ago that we were 12 years away from the destruction of the world by climate change. So now we're less than a decade away. The seas are going to rise, the coasts are going to be inundated. Do a search sometime on where the most powerful people in the world live, and you'll find almost universally they live on waterfront property. Well, but we're supposed to be outraged. We're supposed to eat bugs and eliminate toilet paper because the whole world depends on it. It's this desire for absolute truth, something that we will die for to give us something that we will live for. And yet, because we've thrown out all of the real possibilities for that, we end up chasing after these phantoms of silly issues. They've told us that natural law can no longer be followed because natural law has transgressed the new sexual orthodoxy. We can't even follow the great philosophers and poets of Western civilization because we're told that they're too male and too white, and so they're now disqualified from helping us think about the big questions of life. You see, the only thing that remains is this vacuous echo chamber where we potentially talk to ourselves, trying to make mountains out of what truly are molehills. So last week it was the divinely spoken prophecy about gas stoves. But next week it'll be something else. We'll be mad-libbed into a new prophecy that is meant to demand our attention and to change our behavior. Next week, it could be some mid-level FDA employee who says, I don't know, walnuts are racist. He'll tell us walnuts have always been racist, and we should have known that walnuts were racist. In fact, we should only eat almonds because walnuts are racist. It'll be a CDC intern who tweets that somehow we're in danger of bacterial infections if we use air fryers. And we'll be all up in arms about air fryers, and the left will look at conservatives and they'll say, you're suffering from French fry diphtheria denialism. It's ridiculous. It needs to be mocked. Why? Because we're mean? No, it needs to be mocked because this perpetual outrage about the silliest stuff, it is an attempt to replace the hardwired desire, the impulse built into humanity to yearn for something truly significant, to hold on to absolute truth so that there's not only something worth dying for, but in turn, there's now something worth living for. Because we've thrown out all the options, we are perpetually searching for something else. Let me show you what the Bible has to say. In Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 11, the preacher says this, God has made everything appropriate in its time. He has also set eternity in their heart, without the possibility that mankind will find out the work which God has done from the beginning, even to the end. The preacher in Ecclesiastes said, God has put eternity in our heart. He has put a yearning for something unchanging, something absolute. It's hardwired into who we are as human beings. But He also made it impossible for us to discover all the work of God from the beginning of His work until the end of His work. Why? Because the only way we can know the purpose and the plan of this yearning that is in us is we have to find the one who gave us that purpose. God doesn't want us seeking just His work. He wants us to find Him. That's the only thing that satisfies. And when we've thrown out all of our absolute truths, when we've thrown out the possibility of God, we are left with a human condition that is perpetually chasing after something that we can be devoted to, something that we can be outraged about because we need some reason to get up in the morning and go change the world. Well, if you find God, you don't have to settle for this perpetual outrage machine that our culture tries to produce just to give us a reason to get out of bed. Here's another verse that I want you to hear. Proverbs chapter 19, verse 23. The fear of the Lord leads to life, so that one may sleep satisfied, untouched by evil. You see, to find God is to find the reason for existence. It's to find the solution to the yearning of the human condition. To find God and to live in relationship with God through Jesus Christ is to sleep satisfied, to get off the hamster wheel of perpetual outrage, and to be able to look at silly things and say, wow, that's a silly thing. Because now we've discovered that there is something worth dying for, and it gives us something worth living for. The good news of the gospel is not only that you can be forgiven of your sins, but it's that you can have a purpose and meaning in your life so you don't have to trivialize your attentions day after day with whatever the latest outrage is that we're all supposed to be up in arms about. I don't know about gas stoves. If they're really dangerous, then prove to me that they're dangerous. But until you do, leave me alone, because I have important stuff to give my life to. This is Truth Currents.